Since I posted my video on how to get rid of register breaks, in which I talked a little bit about glottal compression and closed quotient, I've been getting a lot of really interesting questions from you guys. And a lot of those questions seem to be coming from a place of misunderstanding or confusion. And I really hope, I sincerely hope, that my video didn't contribute in any way to that confusion. And if it did, I humbly apologize. Over the years, I've worked with a lot of students that have come from other teachers and training methods that I would say place an imbalanced focus or emphasis on certain aspects of technique. And one of those imbalances or imbalanced focuses is glottal closure, sometimes referred to as chord closure. And what I find is that students tend to respond to that imbalanced emphasis in training in an imbalanced manner. And they tend to take these concepts a little bit too far. And in particular, chord closure, right? Chord closure, chord closure, chord closure. You emphasize that enough, and what happens is the student begins to believe that his or her glottal adductor muscles are not functioning properly. And so what then happens is the student starts to take that concept a little bit too far, that chord closure concept, to the point where he or she starts to have pressed phonation. With pressed phonation, there's essentially too much vocal effort at the glottal level. So those glottal adductor muscles that bring the vocal folds together and keep them together during phonation, during singing, are working hyperfunctionally. They're pressing the vocal folds together. And what happens then is that we're not able to move enough air past those vocal folds. And this imbalance leads to a really, we call it a pressed sound. You can hear that, right? You can hear, I'm basically squeezing that sound out. And if I were to continue going up the scale like that, I would start to feel as though I'm stacking up breath pressure because, again, I'm not actually moving enough air through the glottis past those vocal folds. There needs to be a balance. There needs to be what we call flow phonation, in which we're moving appropriate amounts of air past the vocal folds. Now, the opposite of pressed phonation would, of course, be breathy phonation, in which we have insufficient glottal closure and too much air passing through the glottis, going past the vocal folds. And that creates that turbulent sound that we perceive as breathiness or airiness. Ah, ah, ah. Not a very efficient way of using our instruments. It's good for some artistic effect, but not the most efficient way of using our breath. So when I'm talking about glottal compression, I just want it to be understood that I am not suggesting that we need to apply excessive force in order to get our vocal folds together and to keep them together. That's an imbalance. I am talking about vocal effort. I'm talking about bringing those vocal folds together and keeping them together so that those vocal folds can resist the air pressures from beneath. But that does not mean that we do so in an imbalanced manner. That doesn't mean that we have to press and force in order to get good chord closure. There's a balance that we need to achieve. We have to have flow phonation, we have to have flow phonation. We have to allow the air to continue to move past the glottis, right? We want to have enough glottal closure, enough resistance to the airflow at the glottal level in order to prevent breathiness, but not so much that we take it to the extreme of pressed phonation, in which our instrument is just operating hyperfunctionally, because that's not healthy either. And that's not really an efficient means of using our instruments. We want balance. It's always about balance. To really play around with those varying degrees of glottal compression. And what you will notice, if you're really kinesthetically aware, is that the more effort you have up here in keeping those vocal folds together, the higher those pressures become and the less air that moves through the glottis. And the less effort you have up here, right, the lower the subglottal pressures and the more air tends to move past the vocal folds. Play around with it. So I really hope that this video has helped to clear up any confusion or misunderstanding that you may have had about glottal compression, or vocal effort as I sometimes refer to it as. And if you continue to have questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will do my very, very best to help clear up that confusion and answer all of your questions. And of course, I will continue to record videos on this topic in which I share with you my favorite strategies for finding that balance between the breath pressures and the glottal resistance efforts. And if you're interested in learning more about this and finding out when those videos are posted, please consider subscribing to this channel if you haven't already done so. Thank you so much for watching today.